Hello everyone. How's everybody doing today? I will just get everything loaded here properly on my end while I give you a second to hop on. And, oh, I better make sure there's no volume. We would have had a bunch of extra noise here. Let me just get this loaded. All right. Okay, there we go. Hi, Lena. How are you? Now my phone's acting funny and it doesn't want to keep the feed loaded. Just shut down. So we just want to make sure I can follow along with your comments. There we go. Hi, Karen. Seems to be working now, so hopefully it will stay loaded on my end. How are you guys doing today? I hope everything is going well. Lena, what's the weather like where you are? It's cold here today. It's was rainy earlier, but it's just cold. And one of my tomato plants has begun to turn yellow at the bottom, which is always a sad sign that fall is coming. All right, so if you are new, I'm Alana Worf, Sleepless Stamper. I'm in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Hi, Linda, in Canada, and I am a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator. I have been doing a series. The idea is that they would be a week long, and I would create 5 cards that you could earn the card kits for each week with a $65 purchase. You can do so with the host code that I share or by contacting me if you're local and you want to pick up locally. That's an option as well. And this week I have been working with Wildflower Designs. So that is a stamp and die bundle. That is this one here. I use this one with my In Color Club. And what I like to try to do is I have an In Color Club and I have a Stamp Club. And hopefully I can get back to a Scrapbook Club now that we're going to be having some extra scrapbooking things to offer. But I tried to make whatever the bundle or stamp set we're using with Club be one of the ones that I use that month for the Facebook Lives. So we used Wildflower Designs with In Color Club. We created, this was their thank you card. We created this card. And we're just trying to find the second card that we made. It has gone rogue, but this was the other card that they made. So we did this one here. And I love this one so much that I decided I was going to do this in a Misty Moonlight version to coordinate with the 2 cards that I have done so far this week here on Facebook Live. So this was day number 1, this was day number 2, or project 1, project 2, and this is project number 3. So I'm going to create this one today and show you guys how I got this watercolor effect, kind of a backlit effect. And hopefully you guys like this technique and give it a try. Okay, so I'm going to move these over and I will review the supplies for you guys. What was I going to say? I was going to say something and it has slipped my mind. All right, so I have a thick white card base. It is 4 1/4 by 11, scored at 5 1/2. Then I have a 4 by 5 1/4 basic white that is embossed with the exposed brick folder. I have pre-cut these 2 dies from the set. Now I don't have the dies handy, but I may get a chance to grab those by the end of the live. So with the die that cuts this in particular, you get this nice frame and the insert. So I've cut it in black and you actually get both. Hi, Ramona. So you get both pieces. I don't need the insert for the black, so that I just put aside. And then I also cut the watercolor paper. I don't need the frame, so I'll just put that aside. But what I did do is I pulled in another piece of black that I'm going to use to mount the 2 of these 2 afterwards so that I can dimensional the whole thing. There are other ways to dimensional a frame and insert combo. This was just what I decided to do for today. So I have that supply as well. And then I also have my Misty Moonlight. I chose to not use a piece from the actual Wildflower Designs DSP that coordinates. I liked the look of this one, just like I used on our In Color Club card. So that's what I went with. I did play around with some other patterns and I opted against them. And then I have a scrap of black that I'm going to use for the greeting. It's just tucked aside with my Versamark. And then I've got some linen thread and that's it. Aside from that, I have Versamark. So in case anybody likes to stamp along, I have Versamark as well, which I am going to use on my, with the images here. And also by giving you guys the rundown of all the supplies. If you're somebody who has earned the kits and you're coming back to watch this, then you'll know what supplies to gather. So we have Versamark. I have the ebony, which is like black. Wow embossing powder. I also have the white embossing powder for my greeting. I have a blending brush. And then I also have some water. And hi, Audrey. How are you? And Louise and Catherine. I also have my aqua painter. So the aqua painter will do most of the work, but I keep some extra water on hand just to get a nice flood of water over top of this watercolor piece of paper. All right, so those are the supplies. And I may even, somebody's got an alarm going off outside the door. I may even do a little splatter on top of this afterwards. And if I do that, I would probably just use the Misty Moonlight blends. Oh, I should mention Misty Moonlight is the color of ink I'm using. So that is another supply. Now you could do this in any color that you want, such as, I'll just show you, remind you here, we have the Petunia Pop and the Shy Shamrock. If you wanted to remake these and you don't have this DSP, you could swap this out for anything else and do this in any color because I'm just doing black and white. I did play around with putting this one on Misty Moonlight, but I just gravitated back to the basic white. All right, we found the extra card. So this is the other card that we made. So very similar designs. One uses the frame, and then I used a transparent stencil that I made with the die. Oh, thank you, Louise. And we watercolored inside of it for this one here. So I showed them two different ways to do that watercolor. And I don't often use the cards that we've made with Club to come back and do a live, but I love this one so much that I really wanted to show you. And I remembered what it was I was going to say before. That was that this was inspired by a slightly different version, different shapes, but this idea here that, hi Sandy, you made it, that Helen Reed had made. So I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned that the idea was inspired by a card or a couple of cards of hers that I saw. All right, let's get started. I will try not to make you guys wait through my chatter any longer than you have to. And we are going to do some watercolor. I love watercolor. It is, now I went and hid my aqua painter underneath that scrap of black that the scrap that's not really a scrap. It's a pretty big piece. Okay, so I just have to grab my paper towel. Okay, so this is likely Misty Moonlight ink in there, but just to be sure, there we go. All right, now what I should have done is refilled this. 1 second. There we go. I was able to get a little bit more in there out of that dish of water. I'll move that water out of the way. Oh, thank you, Sandy. That's so kind of you. Sometimes I wonder, am I just like, I don't know, talking your guys' ear off and you want me to just get to the card? Okay, so first what we want to do is we're going to flood this watercolor paper. And what I also want to do is just make sure these little bits, you know, sometimes when you cut watercolor paper, you get these little fragments of paper, especially with these little stitched lines. And what I learned is that you don't want, when you're going to emboss with black powder, you want to make sure that you get rid of these. I'm sorry for the scratchy noise, but the other day when I was using a watercolor piece of paper and my black powder, when I poured the excess powder back into this, those tiny little bits ended up in my powder. And if you want to then go and emboss a solid image afterwards, you don't want those tiny little flecks of white in there. I couldn't understand where they were coming from because I had just freshly opened the container. It was the first time I used it, and I couldn't understand why any little white flecks got in there, but it was these little itty bitty pieces of paper. And I was able to use my take your pick tool and gently dab it into there and get most of them out, but I didn't get them all. Some of them were just too fine, and it pushed them, you can see all those. It pushed them just further down into my paper. So hopefully that will save some of you if you have gone to the expense of replacing your powders with these nice, fabulous new Wow powders from getting little flecks in them. So I'm sorry for the sidebar, but I just had that moment of remembrance where I wanted to, or remembering, I shouldn't say remembrance, but where I wanted to be sure to tell you guys that. So I am creating a generous flood of water. The last time we did watercolor, we were coloring an image, and we were doing just a very, very, very slight amount of water. This time, because we are flooding this whole thing, it's not an image where we're trying to do shading and we need to be careful of how much water we put so that the color doesn't flood all over the place. You want to be generous with this one. Okay, so now I have my Misty Moonlight ink pad, and I have put a drop of refill in there. I did that one when I made the sample, and that's what's left, so I don't need to add more. That will be lots. And I'm just pulling a little bit aside. That is going to be too dark, so I'm just going to add, I could have just squeezed it through my barrel there, but I'm just adding some water to tone that down. There we go. Add some more water. You can add more color, but it's harder to take it away. So you want to, if you want to be cautious and start lighter, then that's what I would recommend. And if your paper is, if you're noticing that, you can see there, that's seeped in a little faster than I wanted it to, you can add a little bit of water ahead of you in case some of that has seeped in. You can just kind of go forward, add some water, and then come back over to add color. Whoops, that was darker than some of the others. Now I'm gonna have to work to blend that in. Add a little bit more color after that. We had fun with this watercolor yesterday. I had to do my live at 5:30 yesterday so I could get it done in time to head into my In Color club. And these are the ones that I was showing you the samples before that we did, and they were fun. It's always fun to do watercolor. All right, there we are. That's probably enough color. Now I left it a little streaky. If you don't want it streaky, you can work with it a little bit more to even that out, but I kind of like it that way for this. So I'm going to leave that. I'm going to just get rid of the Misty Moonlight out of the aqua painter. There we go. And somewhere I set the cap down, and now to just locate it, I'm going to close this up for the moment and grab that. There it is. It's under my paper towel. There we are. We're going to just dry this off. I don't want that to get on the card or anything else for now. Hi Sonia. We have a neighbor across the back fence who has a beautiful yard, and a few weeks ago they had company from BC, and she was grilling in their backyard for them, and it smelled so good. Ethan popped his head over the fence and said, Ethan is our 20-year-old, for anyone that doesn't know. He popped his head over the fence and told them that whatever they were making smelled so good. And so they invited us over and gave us a bite of their chicken, and they had made this cauliflower. It was so good. And then she went and bought more of the teriyaki sauce that they had purchased that her friend uses, and picked one up for them and one up for us. So I need to go take her thank you card. So I might give her this one. All right, so we're gonna just heat set this. We wanna make sure that it's nice and dry. It may curl a little bit. Yesterday when we did this in Color Club, we did the watercoloring and then we set it aside while we worked on the other steps, which I could do. I could go do my greeting and come back to this, but we're gonna just get to it. Hi, Lori. If you like cauliflower, this cauliflower that they had was delicious. I had never made it like that before. When I shut this off, I'll tell you a little bit about it. Still a little damp. My apologies, you guys have to wait with me through this. But our stamping would not turn out so well if this was wet. The embossing powder would just stick to the whole thing. So you need to make sure that it's nice and dry. So again, if you were doing multiples or you're working on something else, you can watercolor and set it aside. And then it tends to retain the color a little bit more and also stays nice and flat, or can stay nice and flat. It doesn't always, but depends on how much you've saturated your paper and how much it curls. Okay, let's try that. We'll see if this is dry. I think that's good. Okay, so before I move on to this, while I gather my supplies, I'll tell you real quick about that cauliflower. They parboiled it for 5 minutes, let it cool, and then you mix mayonnaise and Parmesan cheese, and then you put we put garlic in. She used garlic salt. We just put straight garlic and then onion salt, I think. And so we did that, and then you like slather the cauliflower with it, and then you bake it, and it was so delicious. All right. I have Versamark here, and I need my embossing buddy, which I thought was just right here. Oh my goodness. We kind of trashed things looking for that card. Let me just check. It's probably right in front of my face, but 1 second. I'm sorry to leave you guys for a second. It's probably right outside this door. Yes, it was right outside the door with my paper snips. Okay, so we need the embossing buddy, and I'm just gonna make sure that I cover this. Hi Meg, how are you? I'm sorry I'm not using Spotlight on Nature today. I know how much you love that set. I went and put this away, and this is the one that I need. All right, so I'm going to begin with this one here. And if you guys are just joining for the first time, what I like to do is use a piece of tape or sticky note paper and make sure, especially because these were left out overnight with Versamark on them, and we have a cat. So it bothers me when I forget to do this, and I go to all the trouble of embossing, and then you get a stray line. Aw, thank you so much, Lori. That's so kind. Aw, I love that. I am happy to inspire you guys. So I try to just make sure that there aren't any stray little cat hairs on there, because then when I stamp and put the powder on, that's when you notice that there's a funky line on your project. So if you are like us and you have a little critter around, then before you heat emboss, you may want to go, or even when you're just stamping, I will often make sure that I just lift off any little stray fluffs that have gotten on my stamps. And these were right where she likes to walk all over. So I want to make sure that that does not happen. All right, so we're going to ink this one up. I've already embossing buddied that. So now I'm going to ink this one. I'll just show you here. It's kind of angled right up this way on the middle of this section here. And I'm trying to make sure that the stem comes a little bit over the edge so that I don't have the end of the stem floating up beyond there. I am not going to heat this first, or I'm not going to heat it once the powder is on before I do the next image, but I'm going to coat it. Because this is Versamark, it's hard to see it. And I was telling you guys, I think I was telling you guys this last week, that you want to be extra cautious not to overheat your images, because then they go kind of flat and they lose their glossiness. So, I posted it in one of my Instagram posts, or Instagram, Facebook, and I had used my own photo as an example to say that if you looked at one of my cards versus the other, one I had overheated, and the color, because I was watercoloring and using the outline as a well, the color bled outside the lines because I overheated it and the lines just went flat. So I am going to powder each one, and I don't want to leave this extra powder on there. That's going to get on my stamp. So I'll powder each one, and then I will not heat it. I'm going to stamp the next one, because now that it's got powder on there, I can see the placement and I can see where to go with my next stamp. So now I'm going to use this one that kind of looks like, I think it's like a Queen Anne's lace. This one, that's okay, Louise. It is Wildflower Designs. That's this one here. All right, so I'm going to place this part of the plant just right here. This one I don't need to powder first, because the next one that I'm going to do is the same, and it's way over here. So they are not going to interfere with each other. Now, oh, no problem. I can powder these. There. Now the nice thing about watercolor paper, and I don't know if this powder makes a difference versus the old powder, but I have found that when you're using basic white or something like that, if you get this halo, it's almost like that powder just leaves a little bit of a shadow, but it brushes off so nicely, so I don't even see that halo. Just make sure if you get a halo that you brush that off before you heat set. If you have already heat set, then it's too late. It's set into the paper. All right, so I need to move that aside. So it's a little bit of back and forth with your stamping, powdering, and then stamping, powdering, but I find that it's worth it. And by only heating everything once, by heating at the very end after we've stamped everything, you are less likely to overheat the images. The first time I made this card, hi Michelle, does the card look, well, I guess you haven't seen the card just yet, but it will look familiar to you in a moment, and you'll get to see it in another color. That powder may not go in there nicely because it has a little bit of Versamark, and I don't want it for the next go around anyway, so I just dumped that in the garbage, which is fine. Okay, now we have one more. And I feel like I lost my train of thought there. Was I saying something more about this? That by only heating once at the end, you're less likely to overheat? Oh, I was saying that the first time I made this, I heated this one first, and then I did the others, and that one was like not very glossy at all by the end. So that's when I decided to switch it up for my second one and stamp, powder them all, and then heat once. I'm going to try to not put this one so close to where the powder, or where my stamped image was. There we go. My really fine brush is in the other room. So we have this. Now I'm going to just put this powder away. Get it out of the way. I often just use a piece of paper. I have all the tools for embossing, and I just rely on a piece of paper. Now I'm going to just wipe that out of the way. And just brush the black powder off my embossing buddy there before it, I don't know if it would set in, but I don't want to chance it. Okay, so now I need to heat set. Now, in case you can't hear me well once I turn the heat gun on, I am going to angle this. I have a light over here. And so I'm going to angle it towards that light so that I can see the light reflect off of the image as it becomes glossy. Then I know, move on right away. Don't stay focused on that spot. So I pick a spot, I stay focused on it. As soon as it turns glossy, I move on to another one. And then that way I am less likely to overheat the image. And I'm also going to aim my gun away from this until it has a little bit of a chance to warm up. So you'll just hear my gun on for a minute here, and then I will aim it at this, knowing that it's already warm and I'm not going to accidentally keep it on one part for too long. So it should be good in just a second here. So I'm going to start with this one. I don't know if you'll be able to see what I see from that view. I can already see that the very bottom of that image has heated and turned glossy. So I'm moving over. I'm going to get this little one on the end and then move my way up here. And I'm going to burn my fingers. Doesn't usually deflect towards me so much. There we go. That is all glossy. So that is the bottom here. I love these. I love the look of a silhouette against, it does have a shelf life. I did not ever know that, but would it probably be more than a decade old? I feel like I have some that may have done that as well. And I absolutely notice a difference between our embossing powders that we had before they sold out and these wow powders. If you have access to these wow powders, if you're a demonstrator or if you have one wherever you are, Lori, these are, they absolutely make a difference. I was going to say they are amazing. They are wow. I do really like them. Okay, so now we need to, well, we don't need to, but I'm going to blend. So you can see here, that's quite different. This does look really nice by itself. I'm going to just pop these onto the card as is so that you can see a side-by-side with the blending and without. This is not glued down, keep in mind, but it'll give you the general idea. So if you really like, oh my gosh, this just as is, you do not have to blend around the edge. But if you like that look, I especially like that look with the petunia pop. I just love how it leaves that center looking like this is backlit. So if you prefer this, don't feel like you have to add the extra step, but I will add the extra step for you guys. All right, so I have my Misty Moonlight blending brush. And then just make sure, I'm gonna make sure I don't have any powder stuck on here. So I don't wanna get that into my brush or back onto my ink pad. So make sure you tap off. You don't wanna accidentally put that straight onto here. So tap off first. You're in Ontario. Grand Bend. I am not familiar with Grand Bend. I will look it up though. My mom was born in Bracebridge. I'm in Manitoba, but my mom was born in Ontario. And I have a couple of teammates out in Ontario. So I'm just doing a thin border at first, and then I kind of assess, is that enough? Do I like it is, or do I want to add a little more, or did I accidentally add too much on one side and now I need to balance it out? Okay, so I feel like I want to add more. I want this backlit area to look more obvious. So I'm going to add more, but I'm going to try to stay just right near the edge. All right. Sorry, I just had to switch something there. I don't want to go, I can't stay right at the edge or I'm not going to have it look backlit, but I do want to deepen it around the frame. I love the glass mat for this. Do all of you who are watching have a glass mat? Let me know if you have one or not, even if it's not this one. I do have a couple others. Okay, now maybe I'll come in a little more around the top. Hi, Breland, how are you? It's good to see you here. Breland is one of my fellow artisan design team members. You have two, Lena. So do you have two of this one? I have two of this one as well, actually. I often craft on one. And then if I have like little remnants left, I can at least leave them there. And I know I have another one that I can come and do a live with. You guys might remember that for a week or two, I was not using my glass mat because I only had one and it was always full of stuff I was working on. So I decided it was best to just get a second one. I'm just gonna add a tiny bit more down here. It's fabulous. I love this thing. I don't know that I will ever be in a position to put one at every crafting spot when I have more studio space, but wouldn't that be nice? I know some people do, and I think that that is just amazing. I'm glad for them that they can do that. I'm just gonna grab some water and, sorry for the squeaking, wipe that ink off. I am all done, the blending. And I just don't want to get that blue ink all over my projects. All right, so this is the one that we're working towards. We have done all of this so far. Now I want to stamp the thank you so that I can get that ready. You do have one, Lori. Did you have a different one before, either of you? Or is this your first time with a glass mat? We used to have the one that went with that circle cutter, and I feel like it would probably serve the same purpose. It's just not as big. So I'm just making sure I don't have any stray cat hairs on that one too. Now, sometimes the stray pet hairs may be on your ink pad. So if you have cleaned this and you are still getting that problem, you can take some painter's tape, or even if you have just like Scotch tape, and place it down on your ink pad and then lift up the circle cutter one. Okay. And it probably serves exactly the same purpose. I actually still have that one too. So if you ever have any stray things, whether it's hair or you've gotten like anything, those little bits of the paper here, I'll show you guys some more of them again. These little remnants that flake off of the watercolor paper from those little stitched marks. If any of those get on your ink pad or any little bits of paper, just put some packing tape or painter's tape down on there and lift it off, and then that way you can clean it off without having to stick your fingers right on there. Dog hair, yes, right? It's cat hair here. It's like it's frustrating. You like stamp your greeting and the rest of the greeting is perfect, but you've got a stray hair from a pet across there, and then you've got to restart. If you're like me anyway, you've got to restart. All right, now white is what I'm going to use for this one, and I am not going to use the same sheet as a funnel because I don't want to cross-contaminate powder. So I'm just grabbing a fresh little scrap sheet here that will act like my funnel. And this is actually the reason why half the time I don't use my embossing tray, is because it's so staticky, and sometimes those little bits of powder have stuck to it, and unless I've rinsed it out, I don't like to put another color in it because I don't want to end up with flecks of white and black or flecks of black and the white. So a lot of times it's just faster for me to grab a piece of paper. So that is the only reason, is just laziness. I haven't cleaned my embossing trays. Now actually, put my paintbrush down. There's a few little white flecks there. They're probably outside of my cutting radius, but just in case. I love how this new powder embosses. It is just such a nice crisp white. Do any of you have the new Wow powders? Have you tried them? I feel like before sometimes you'd get a spotty image with the old white if you were doing that on black, but look how nice and bold that is. I love them. Okay, so I just want to cut this smaller. Oopsie. And that just makes it easier for me to cut around. And then I'm going to fussy cut. I'm sorry that this is a bit of a pain. Some people do not love to fussy cut. I don't love it, but I don't mind it. I do wish that we had dies, but we can't have dies for every set. That would just, I mean, for every greeting. There are dies for this set, but just not for the greetings. We probably wouldn't want the price tag of greeting dies for every greeting stamp, right? And I liked it just being a really fine greeting, as opposed to stamping it on a label and then losing the effect of the watercolor and the black image against it by the time we added the size of a label. So I decided to just fussy cut. I actually was going to stamp this greeting right on the label. And after I had my images stamped so nicely, I was too afraid to stamp the greeting straight onto the watercolor. Without a stamparatus, and so I decided I would just fussy cut it. So if you are following this again on the replay to make your cards, if you would rather stamp on your die cut label that you have stamped the flowers on, you could do so. I would just suggest embossing it with black, not the white like I've done on this one. And if you do that, please do let me know. I'd love to see how it turns out. I think I need to make a few of these. There's another lady in the neighborhood that gave us some of our basil when ours wasn't looking so good. I ended up repotting ours with new soil and it bounced back, but it wasn't looking like it was going to. So she had given us a basil plant. So I think I will give her one of these too. Yes, they are so much better, those powders. Okay, so that is the greeting. And one more thing I need to prep is this little strip of paper. I nearly forgot that one. Now, my little cutter's not in here. This is the trouble when I craft all over the place. The dog, I don't like to be in a room by myself either during the day, but the dog doesn't really leave you alone if you leave the room. She wants to come sit in your lap. So if you're in the living room with her, she will cuddle up on the couch, even if you're not sitting with her. But if you're in a different room, that's a no-go. So it's easier to just craft on the floor out there. So I end up with stuff everywhere. Oh, now I still need that. Now I'm going to cut this. That was a 1/2 inch strip of, I was too busy talking, of this paper here from the Color Collection DSP. So it's got the circles on one side. This, I call this a beachy pattern. I don't know what it's actually called, but to me it's a beachy pattern. And now I need 2 pieces that are 1 3/4. So 1/2 inch by 1 3/4. If you wanted to give it more than a 1/2 inch just to be cautious, you could do so. But I find that the 1/2 inch is enough for what I'm going to do. And now we're done there. All right, so let's just quickly review all of the supplies, and then I think I am good to assemble. So I have the base, the embossed layer. I have my 2 little strips that are 1/2 inch by 1 3/4 to go on the outer edges of that layer. I have the frame, the watercolor, the greeting. I have my linen thread aside. And then I also have this black piece that I am going to glue these 2 down to. So I'll actually do those first before we start assembling the rest. Now I have my Tombow. Oops, wrong side. I am going to put a very thin bead. Well, now of course a blob comes out. That is not normally how much I would put on there for this. That right there is more like what I would do. This will take some concentration, so I'll probably chat a little bit less while I'm doing this part. There we go. Now, this I will glue down to one edge here. And I'm going to just burnish that down. Okay. And then I am going to glue this down. And I'm going to put a little more on here because I want to make sure that this does a really good job of holding down the watercolor layer. Maybe go a little closer to the edge because I don't want this to curl up. I should have made sure that I made sure that this piece was nice and flat first. Okay, and then we'll burnish this down too, just to make sure that there's a nice bond between the watercolor and the basic black. So if you're wondering why I'm doing this, if you missed the beginning, I am doing this so that I can dimensional the frame and the watercolor layer. You can also just dimensional them separately. You don't have to anchor them to a base first if you wish not to, if you want to conserve your paper. I just found this easy to do this way. Some people will tape them together on the back first and then just dimensional that. I just wanted to make sure, especially with the watercolor paper being a little warped after you heat it and wet it and heat it, I wanted to make sure that it had something to be nice and flat too, so that it wasn't kind of winging up past the frame. So that was my thinking, but there's many ways you could do this if you need to save on paper. And then I'm just doing a fussy cut. And I'm just angling a little bit. You can see my scissors are angled this way. I'm doing that on purpose so that I can angle slightly underneath the edge so that this black that's underneath doesn't stick out beyond the frame. And then that way too, I don't end up accidentally snipping my frame. I might have just snipped a little bit while I was trying to hold that back and show you guys. All right, so now we have this layer ready. It's nice and sturdy between those two, and now we can begin to put layers together. So I'm going to move these aside for a second. I like to distress the edges. You guys know me, or if you know me, you know that. I like to do this, so I'm just distressing these. I don't always do this, but I often will when I am using one color for this layer and the base, especially if the layers are pretty clean. It just gives a little bit of extra detail or depth to the one and helps it stand out a little bit more so that it doesn't just kind of flatten out into the next layer. Now I will just Tombow this. There we are. Now, if any of my in color people are watching, or if any of you guys who were here when I was going through the DSP, some of the wild wheat DSP with the floral patterns might seem a little wild, but I was saying I actually like them because I have a shirt that, well, and the fact that I have a shirt kind of indicates that I would like those colors, but this is the shirt. So this shirt reminds me of that DSP. I did not intentionally put this shirt on today. It's just because it was that cold here today that I decided to wear more than short sleeves. All right, now this is, let's see, 1.5 inches. These are about 1.5 inches up from the bottom. So I'm gonna go ahead and glue these on. And that is the dashed line. Just gonna line that right up to the outer edge and burnish that. And then glue the other one on the opposite side. I have to show you guys something funny. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna be really anal. I'm gonna peel this one off. I like to make these symmetrical. This pattern is on the outside, so I wanna rotate this so that that similar pattern is on the outside as well. I'm a bit of a weirdo sometimes. You guys might just appreciate that though. I feel like I might be in good company. Sometimes I wouldn't notice, but... And if you gave this card to me and it was the other way, I would never notice. It's just when I'm making it that I notice. All right, there we are. Now, this is going to go on with dimensionals. So I'm just going to use black. Oh, there's a little dot of water on there. And there goes Ruby barking. We had all kinds of appointments during the day today, like back and forth. And so she's a little extra. She didn't come with us, of course, so she's a little extra wanting attention, which is okay by me. Oh my gosh, I cannot get that backing off. Can you guys hear her howl or bark? She just howled once. She isn't being noisy right now, but let me know if you actually heard her. I was surprised the other day in class, they said they actually couldn't hear her, and I just assumed that whenever she makes noise, everybody hears her. I am in a room with the door closed, but there we go. So that is dimensional. Now we're gonna get the back of this ready, and I will snip. I have a couple that are in half. You can hear her, okay. I'm not glad that you can hear her, but I'm glad to know that you can hear her too, because I just assumed that she for sure could be heard. All right, so I am going to leave a little bit of space at the bottom of the thank you so that my knot of my linen thread bow can hide behind there. And I do want to put a little piece behind the bottom of this Y. Okay, there we are. Now we are going to tie a linen thread bow. And if you have watched before, you've heard me say this, but I like to repeat it as often as I remember. When I am cinching back my bow, I like to hold the knot flat between my fingers so that I'm also holding the base of each loop flat. Then that way when I cinch back, it will help prevent those loops from twisting. It's kind of like the embossed image when you go to all that trouble of embossing it and then you've got like a stray pet hair. It's kind of frustrating. And so it's the same with this. You've tied the nice bow, you don't want those loops to twist. So that's my tip for you guys with that. Now I'm gonna use a little glue dot. If you need to make your glue dot smaller, you can also, sometimes they have a little strand of glue, pinch that behind. Hi, Kathy. Now I want to place my thank you right along here. So I am going to, it's actually a little bit right above. So I'm going to put my knot just a little bit along that line and, sorry, along the line and inset just a little bit. There we go. And I'm twisting. This one's a little bit short. There we go. And then I'm just twisting that a little sideways. Now I can take my thank you and that little knot should tuck right under here where I don't have a dimensional, and that way it won't push that part of my greeting forward too much. But I do have a little stray. There we go. So I'm just tucking that behind the beginning of the thank you. There we go. So that is the card for today. That was a little too close. Sorry about that. Get these out of the way. I'll do a quick recap of the cards so far for the week. I have, just move this water away from the cards. We have project number 1. This one does feature some of the DSP. And then I have, and I got to try for the rest of the week not to use thank you. So we'll see how that goes. And then this was project number 2. And then in keeping with the color scheme that the DSP includes, I wanted to do this technique, which was a case of this card that I did with my In Color Club. I wanted to do it in a color that coordinates with the DSP. So I chose Misty Moonlight. And I did play around with, I don't have the piece handy. Actually, I do. It is this piece. I tried, you can see here, I cut that strip off. I tried this DSP and I just wasn't loving it. So I switched over. Yeah, that's too funny, Lori. I totally have OCD. We were just joking about that today. So I switched it out and went with the same one. But again, if you have the DSP, you could use a different one if you want. But that is Misty Moonlight to coordinate with these. So I will come up with something more. I owe you guys 2 more cards. So we'll do projects 4 and 5. I just have to decide whether I'll do both tomorrow or whether I will do one tomorrow and one Saturday. It'll just depend where our weekend takes us. Do you guys have any long weekend? Looked complicated, but you think you can manage it. I hope you give it a try, Louise. If you do, come back and comment or message me and let me know. Send me a picture of your card. I would love to see it. Do any of you guys have long weekend plans? If you're in Canada, I might even be, I don't know, does the US have the same long weekend as we do? I should know this, but I don't remember. So we still have to decide what we're doing with our weekend. We do have the online sale next weekend. So if you are in Canada, my team and I run an online virtual sale of retired product, and we will ship across Canada. So if you're local, you can pick up here. If you are somewhere else in Canada, then we will ship it to you. So how it works is everybody loads their albums of stuff for sale into the sale page, and then you claim items by commenting. Then all of the vendors drop your stuff off to my home. We sort your stuff so that you just have to pick up one package with your stuff from all vendors. And it goes the same for if you're long distance and you're shopping. We will pack it all together, make sure everything's there, send you your total, send you your shipping total, and then we'll ship it to you. So that begins next Friday. So we have stuff to get ready for that too. There is still time to register for the Stampin' Cross Country virtual retreat if you would like to do that. It's open until September 3rd. So if you would like to get the packages to make the 10 cards, this is a sneak peek of the 10 cards that we are going to make on September 27th and 28th. If you cannot join us during the live stamping sessions, which is not in person, but the live YouTube stamping sessions, you will get the recordings. You will still get the tutorials, the recordings, the materials if you're in Canada. If you're in the US and you want to register with one of the girls there so that you can get the paper products, I can let you know about that. And then you will also get additional tutorials, the products or the supplies to make the 10, and then we give you extra tutorials as well. And you can also add on the bundles if you wish, or if you're a demonstrator and you already have the bundles or you like to order them from yourself, you can do that as well. If you have missed earlier in the week, this card here, this little sneak peek is mine, and this one here, and then these ones belong to all of the other girls. There is Heidi Collins, Melissa, Faust, Cheryl Wright, and Marion Doran. I don't know if I said that right. So they will be the ones that I am joining to offer this event with. And we are super excited about it. We're working on pillow gifts and that kind of thing. So it has been, that's actually, Ryan is headed out right now. He's not home. He's gone to get something that I am using for those. So I have to get that designed as well. But anyhow, you can still register for this. The link is on my page. If you don't know how to find it and you want to register, message me and I will send it to you and I can help you out with that. I will be posting Stamp Club information if you'd like to join my Stamp Club. then we will be starting a new round in September. It is a $40 purchase, and then you get the cards of the month. And then you can also count on me doing a live that will give you extra ideas that you can also earn those cards for. So there is that. And then I will have some other events coming up, some classes, a local crop in person, and then bingo and all kinds of fun things. So stay tuned for that information, and I will post to let you guys know when I will be back tomorrow. And I appreciate you guys being here. Thanks so much for taking time out of your evening to stamp with me. It's always fun to have people here to chat with. And I will be back tomorrow. Thanks, everybody. Good night.